other people were being reinstated, and I got frustrated. I mean, I was like waiting every single day, and I wasn't sure it was going to happen. So that's pretty cool. Just kind of letting this chat fill up a little bit. We can get started.
No, it's been a long time. This is very cool. Hopefully we'll have a good turnout tonight. There's a lot to talk about. Things happening in Washington that I think definitely reflect on our areas of interest.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm guardedly optimistic. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about this concession that was being pushed back and forth, and obviously Congressman Massey was on Tucker last night, and they're referencing this church committee, and obviously, I mean, the first concern is that it's just a name, right? Oh, they're just throwing it out there because they want to have that sense of legitimacy about it. But at the same time, there's so much that the FBI and the other government agencies have done wrong, and it's understandable that we might want to take a look at some of that, whether it's the targeting of parents that spoke up at school boards or some of the other issues that are out there. But obviously, in this corner of Twitter, our focus has been Russiagate, and that's really, I think, where all of our hopes are that Congress is going to take a look at some of this stuff.
Yeah, I agree, and I think if you look at this from a 3,000-foot point of view, there's some really positive indications out there that things can happen now, and some of it, I understand that people are disappointed, and it's been so long, it's been years, and statutes of limitations have potentially passed, and all these things, but I see Stevens here, and he said from the beginning, hey, look, we need to focus on getting the truth out. That's the most important thing, because getting people prosecuted, getting people arrested and jailed is just, the stuff we're talking about, it probably was to some extent, a bridge too far. And maybe some people still will, maybe there still are some prosecutions, maybe some big ones. We don't know. Durham's still out there. There's other possibilities, but I do think that the opportunity to get the truth out so that people know and future generations can look back and go, here's what happened. And that's maybe more important in the long run, that the truth comes out and that we repair our republic. We repair the cracks that are there for all to see, and hopefully we can do better.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So I just want to kind of revisit like the church committee a little bit and talk broadly about what that actually was. But this will be like a very free flowing conversation. And if there's anybody on these chats that remember the old Spaces chats that we did months ago, I mean, I leave it pretty much wide open. And if you guys want to ask questions or whatever, very open to questions about pretty much anything that's remotely related to Russiagate. And then we'll kind of let the conversation flow from there. So, revisiting the church committee, right? Because I certainly wasn't alive, and I just wanted to read more about this with everybody throwing that name out there. And it was pretty interesting. I mean, they uncovered a ton of abuse. I mean, they looked at the CIA, they looked at the NSA, the FBI, the IRS as well. And essentially, they found all these abusive programs that were out there. They found one program, they were drugging American citizens on some type of mind control experiment, which is pretty crazy. They certainly found a surveillance program, kind of targeting different political actors. They found a CIA program that was apparently going to focus on assassinations. And then Project Shamrock is one program that they identified. And that was a program where telecommunications companies were sharing their traffic with the NSA. And that sort of piqued my interest a little bit, because we actually still have the same problem today. And I think it was Lee Smith a few weeks ago, and he's like, well, yeah, like the church committee, they're really good at identifying all these abuses, but the reforms that they implemented, particularly around FISA, I mean, that didn't solve anything. If anything, the FISA became a rubber stamp, and they just went and did whatever they felt like doing anyway. And obviously FISA was just abused to get warrants on Carter Page. We still don't have a full understanding of everything they were looking at with those FISA warrants. And then, the telecommunications stuff, that's not, portions of that I think are related to Russiagate, but portions of that are not. I think there's just a spying program that exists, between the NSA and the DoD right now, where they don't feel like our metadata and our DNS data are subject to Fourth Amendment protections. They consider that's like we're throwing away trash, like we don't have an expectation of privacy. And I think most Americans would certainly feel like they have an expectation of privacy. So hopefully there might be some congressional action there, and at least whether or not they can investigate this, I hope they actually take us seriously and pass a comprehensive data privacy bill. Let's see what else I had. Pretty much leaving it wide open. MB, do you have anything?
Just that I couldn't agree more. It's one thing to identify these problems. It's another to try to do something differently than we have in the past and make some changes that stick. And I think there are some good ideas out there, and some of it is just that transparency has to be a much bigger part of this. We can't trust the people that feel like they are entitled to trust in our government, whether it be whatever branch of government, because there clearly is this sort of network of, whether they're in the executive branch, the legislative branch, the media, this sort of elite cadre that will protect each other, will make sure that the wrong toes aren't stepped on. Whether or not they have direct interest, they just know when the boat gets rocked, we have to step up and protect things. That I think that's we've seen so much of that. We could spend all night just going through the list of the media protecting the FBI, because the FBI is giving the media hot leads and tips that are meant to throw investigators off. It's just, we have to break this up somehow. We have to figure out some way, and I think transparency is probably the best solution. It's just that, look, sorry, maybe the Russians will get one over on us. Maybe Al Qaeda will. This is much bigger than that. I think it's a much bigger danger to this country than anything our external enemies can do, that we have these internal enemies that are trying to run the country on the sly and not allow a representative republic to exist.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, one aspect I really did like was that when they did all this work and they finally were done, they took it to the President Ford administration, and of course the president was like, no, like, this is all classified, we're not going to let you release this. So then the committee just unilaterally declassified it. Like, didn't even think that was like possible to do. And hopefully they can create some type of system to do the same thing, because we've seen this before where congressional parties try to do some oversight, and then the information just classified, and then we never see it. And we saw that with the ICA report, the HPSI committee did, and that's still not out. So, I mean, it's one thing to actually get in there and do the work, and hopefully they're serious about enforcing subpoenas and pursuing documents and really uncovering the abuses that are likely to exist. But then on the other hand, they have to make sure they have a system to get that information out. So, Stephen McIntyre, what's up, man? Just hanging out? All right. Willie, I'll add you as speaker. If anybody else has any questions.
Hi, I'm here. Sorry, I just had to turn the mic on.
Sure.
I'm old enough to remember when the Frank Church Committee was on. So, oddly enough, I had an interaction with Congress involving Frank Church back in the 70s when I was probably about your age. So I learned when I was pretty young that the people in Congress were total liars, and nothing much has changed over the years. But the story I have about Frank Church is a long one, so I won't bore everybody with it. Now, I think I've written it up at my blog about 10 or 12 years ago because it was a funny story. But in terms of but the idea of a committee looking at, in terms of the Russiagate angle on it, I guess the number one thing I would like to see is the question Barr asked as soon as the Horowitz report came out, and that's how did the FBI continue on in their sort of deranged pursuit of Trump after the Danchenko interview revealed the degree to which their predicate was non-existent. And Barr asked Durham to find out about the FBI irregularities, omissions, and mispractice. And, that he asked that when Barr reported, more than 3 years ago now, and we still haven't heard anything useful on that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, I couldn't agree with that more because, what Durham does ultimately, whether it's a report, I don't think it's likely that we'll see indictments at this point, but even if it's a report, I mean, we're not going to get the underlying commentary on it. He's going to have some conclusions in there. I'm hopeful and I expect, he'll try to give as much support as possible, but I think it would be great to actually have some of those FBI agents in the room and be able to get the transcript, if not public testimony from them and see what they say, because it's one thing to read it in a report. It's one thing to read a transcript. It's another thing to see it in person and see their body language. I think you can pick up quite a bit. And, it goes to the credibility of the committee and how seriously they're going to take this. I mean, yeah, it's one thing if they want to throw Jim Comey up there because he's a big name and everybody in the country knows who Jim Comey is. But I hope, and I think you'll agree. I mean, I'd like to hear from somebody like Joe Pientka. Like, throw him up there. Let's ask him some questions, or Curtis Heide, or some of these other names that we know, and I'm sure you have a bunch of names in your mind, and whether they do it privately and we just get transcripts or publicly, I think that would be a great focus for Congress and MB, or if you have any other thoughts on it, other focuses for Congress. I mean, we can just keep going with that discussion.
Yeah, I'd be much more interested in getting documents. I mean, at this stage, if they do interviews with these guys, the answers to everything's going to be, well, it was a long time ago, I don't remember. So I think that you can stand up one after another, and we won't learn anything from it. I'm not sure. And the other problem that Congress that the committee is going to have is the sorts of civil service protections where, unless you're the J6 committee, the only people you get to interview are the topmost officials. And so you don't get to hear, I mean, even somebody like Brian Auten was an exception, but unless they get they get to interview the Helsons and those sorts of people ahead of interviewing the Comeys and McCabe's of the world, they're not going to get anywhere. And I don't see how they're going to get a congressional committee is going to be given permission to talk to a Helson or that kind of lower level guy. So I'm not sure where they'd get, and McCabe and Comey and those guys, they won't admit to remembering anything.
Maybe we should back up a second and just, for anybody that has their head under a rock or something, the Speaker of the House election went into sort of a fiasco for a couple of days because there were 20 odd holdouts that had different demands and were not McCarthy fans. And there's a list of things that they got in order to change their votes to put McCarthy in. And one of them apparently was to create this church commission. So people were fighting to create this commission to investigate DOJ, FBI, either wrongdoing or politicization. And that's potentially, I mean, it's a big deal on its face, but I think if you think about it, it could be a very big deal in the sense that there is a cadre in Congress that thinks this is worth, going to the mattresses for, and they did, and they put their careers on the line. I don't think it necessarily is just the number of people that were voted against McCarthy to begin with. I think there are plenty of Republicans that agree that needed to happen, that also voted for McCarthy. So we don't know how many, but I think they're important people. And Thomas Massey, his name's come up. And he said it's going to be a big deal, and that they're going to get to the bottom of this, not just necessarily Russiagate. So I'm sure the Hunter Biden computer and a bunch of other things are kind of looped into this. But it is a good thing that there's going to be a select committee, so it's not getting farmed out to different committees that have to start from scratch necessarily. They'll have a skiff. They'll be able to do a lot of this stuff behind closed doors, and I think they get a lot more done when the television cameras aren't on and they're all grandstanding, spending their however many minutes saying back in Oklahoma, my people, forget all that. If it's sometimes behind closed door actually gets you a little bit further because there's the grandstanding goes away. So that's why I'm kind of excited about this.
I agree with your point about the non-grandstanding. I think that's I mean, you've put it nicely. I think that's very encouraging. And, the last thing it'll be a relief not to watch the grandstanding. But yeah, hopefully they can get somewhere. Massey, I know, I don't know. I mean, he follows me. So he probably follows people in our corner of Twitter and is aware of the kind of approach that we have. So, so I assume he'd probably follow, the other people that I correspond with. I'm sure he follows them. So he's probably more up to date than we think.
Yeah, I hope these guys, and I do hope that they reach out, because there is so much knowledge on this corner. Undead, Steven, Hans, Walk of Fire, Technofog, we all know the names. Fool Nelson, I better say him. There's a ton of you don't have to start from zero. Nobody's looking for a paycheck. No one's looking for a job. Reach out. Anybody here will be happy to just give you some knowledge and help you get off the ground on this thing, because the timing is important. There's less than 2 years now. So
I think that's a great point, MB. I probably should have said that right off the bat. I think it'd be great if they reached out to some of us. I think one of the benefits is that we all have different perspectives, and there's things that speak to us a little bit differently. There's different opinions, and that contrast actually makes for better analysis. It's better to focus. It's better on focusing what's important and what's not. And sometimes when we have differences of opinion, that debate going back and forth, and we can do the same thing with any investigators that we might be able to speak to. We can offer some of those questions that are out there, and even if we don't think a certain topic is important or not, there's still going to be some questions, right? And there's questions on everything. And one thought that I had a few minutes ago, I mean, the Obama administration, I think those documents would be interested to get, because everything that's communicated to the president is documented. It doesn't matter what format or what context. I think it'd be really easy to subpoena the Obama White House for any presidential records and basically anything that was told to President Obama. I'm not saying President Obama did anything wrong. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying it would be really important and interesting to know what he was being told at certain data points.
Yeah. In terms of it, I thought a little bit about listing some of the topics that at least that would be the top of my list. And I think to some extent, if a lot could be done, or at least something could be done by the House declassifying even some of their own materials. For example, I don't know how the hell the J6 committee can issue everything unredacted, whereas the House Russiagate, the House interviews from 2017 are redacted like crazy. And so, I mean, just for the House to go and reissue their transcripts of their 2017 interviews with unredacted would be a very easy thing to do and a good start. One of the questions that would be on my mind, everything on the DNC hack that's been released through FOIA has been almost totally redacted. Now I don't know whether including, and they haven't released even the CrowdStrike reports. So that would be that. Those are things that would be. Why not an unredacted version of the CrowdStrike report?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, I don't think it's as important as people thought at one point. I don't think they actually relied on it, but Yeah.
I don't know what I mean, well, in terms of the benchmarks, the first October 2016 statement where they had confidence that the Russians had hacked the DNC, and I'm very agnostic on this. I mean, I don't buy into the Bill Binney proofs that or claims that they've shown that it was through a thumb drive. I started my interest in Russiagate through the hack angle, and I just remain agnostic. But I'm frustrated that they've never provided the evidence. So I would like to know what evidence what existed as of October 2016 when they released the statement. And one of the curious things there, and I think Ryan's talked about this, he brought it up recently, and he's 100% right on this, was, in the Sussman documents, we find out that the FBI didn't even have an image of the Democrats' servers at that time. So it sounds like they were just winging it in October when they made their assessment. Maybe they weren't, but it doesn't sound like they had a whole lot of information other than what they were told by CrowdStrike and by open source media. The second big benchmark, I think, was the commissioning of the ICA, which was carefully choreographed between the Senate Intel Committee, CIA, and Obama administration. And this is something that gets right to something that is interest of the House, because when the House was briefed on December the 1st, 2016, they were told that they couldn't give the FBI and ODNI at that point couldn't give an assessment as to whether Russia was sort of on the basis that Russia was interfering on it, whether it was to help Trump get elected or just to stir up mud. But in the ICA, a month later, they were 100% sure that Russia was doing so to help Trump. But everything in the Senate Intel Committee report on that section is redacted and double redacted. I mean, there's just nothing on it. So to this day, we have no idea what the secret sauce was that changed everybody's mind in December to say that Russia was trying to undermine Trump, and that was a tremendously important assessment because it really poisoned the well for the incoming Trump administration and made it made it impossible, put the Manchurian candidate sign on top of them. And to this day, that's totally guarded secret. I mean, if there's someone, I'm not even sure that the House Intel Committee knows what it is. I mean, I've talked to Lee Smith or corresponded with Lee Smith about this, and he thinks it was just the Steele dossier recirculated, but I don't think it is. But whatever it is, we don't know. And a third thing I'd be interested in was how the hell did Danchenko get made a confidential human source? I mean, it seems so, and that goes back to the original Barr question, but it sure seems like that was done to bury him. So it would be nice to have the committee investigate why Danchenko was made a confidential human source and how they went about it. And that seems to me like a nice, discrete problem where they actually could find out some facts without sort of having to sort of, consider everything in the world.
Yeah, I think those are three great data points. And obviously, Danchenko being made a CHS, presumably that's why he didn't show up in the Senate Intel report or even the IG Horowitz report. And that's really disturbing because on the face of it, I think, there's a pretty good argument to be made. They only did it so that they could hide him. I mean, that's certainly what it looks like, but I think every, inquiry on that would be important to flush out exactly what the reasons were. And, unfortunately, I think he ended up contributing to other investigations. And that's something that really bothers me because he was using the same subsources that he falsely attributed Russiagate information to. And then he turned around and used the same individuals allegedly or cited them as sources for the basis of other investigations. And that, that leads down a rabbit hole, which may not be a primary focus, but certainly disturbing.
Do we know that he purported to use sort of the same sources like Vorontsov and Galkina and those people? I don't know that we know that.
Yes, we did have. Yes, there is something in there. I don't remember exactly which subsources it was. I think it was Vorontsov, and who's the first subsource? I forgot. It's
Abishev. Yeah. Abishev's Vorontsov, Galkina, and Podobedova.
Yeah, one of the weird things was apparently Abishev was one of them that he used for another investigation too. So I'll have to find that. I'll look that up. There is information on that though.
That's something in this whole thing that is just you can't wrap your head around. Is his reputation is being demolished real time by us. I mean, by this corner. And meanwhile, the FBI is using him real time to, do these supposed investigations and come up, with these successes that they claim. And if you listen, if you go back and look at the Danchenko trial and his handler's representation of him and how great he was and how he was the number one source on Russia and all these things. And, he's a liar and he's just, he's, if you look at all his source network and how ridiculous it was, and meanwhile, real time, like this stuff was out there. If you don't even have to dig that deep to find out that your source is just his credibility is disintegrating. And then up until, even 3 months ago, they're defending him. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, let me push back. I'd like to push back a little bit on the Danchenko as liar motif. I'm not nearly as sold as most people in this corner was that Danchenko lied to the FBI. I know that. I mean, obviously, the Steele dossier was total fabrication, and I think that Danchenko. I don't think it's possible to separate what Danchenko fabricated and what Steele fabricated, but I think it's certainly fair to assume that Danchenko fabricated a lot of it. But he had a get out of jail card that Loftman had given him, and I think he he told the truth to the FBI. The problem was the FBI couldn't handle the truth, and they didn't believe him. Like when he told them how useless all this was, they rejected it. They thought he was, and when he told them he'd never met Millian, they didn't believe it. But I mean, the whole process of Durham representing Danchenko as a liar, I think was it sabotaged the question that Durham had asked. I mean, Durham had asked, well, why after Danchenko told you that this was all bullshit, did all of this continue on? And Durham then charges Danchenko with being a liar. And the lies were on things that were sort of irrelevant to the predication of Mueller. So it was, I really think that whole trial was a travesty. I mean, in terms of answering Durham's question, Durham should have interviewed Danchenko and found out, what he told which FBI officer which, and try to figure out from Danchenko how the FBI had gone off the rails, and did he know whether what Strzok what did he know about Strzok? What did he know about Priestap? What did he know about McCabe? So I just think that they went totally off the rails there. But I don't think in terms of Danchenko being a liar to the FBI, I don't think they proved that. Now, in terms of Danchenko just making up imaginary conversations, for sure. We knew, but that was known from the Steele dossier. I mean, you kind of knew that before Danchenko admitted it.
Well, I think both things can kind of be true in the sense that once Danchenko realized that the FBI wanted him to lie to them, that's what scares me, is that obviously they're not looking for the truth. I need to feed them what they want to hear. That's what scares me. Who knows? That went on for a couple of years. So when they started off the relationship with, I don't think that's true. We don't want to hear that. We're going to go this way. He seemed like the kind of guy that would just go along with whatever you want me to tell you, I will tell you. That seemed like his entire career.
I wouldn't bet 2 cents against that. That goes back, in terms of a church committee report. I mean, that was the problem with the WMD investigation and Curveball. I mean, Curveball's whole modus operandi was, you want to hear about WMD in Iraq. We've got number one WMD. We got the best WMD. We got all the WMD in the world. And I'm sure that all these expats attempting to curry favor will tell, they tell stories that the government wants to hear. But we don't know that. I mean, but the idea, we don't know that. But the flip side of it is that when you compare Danchenko's knowledge of Russia to the knowledge of people like Priestap and Strzok and Motha and especially Brian Otten, I mean, I suspect that Danchenko was giving them better information than Otten.
It's a low bar.
I would still like to go back and revisit the Dolan stuff. I mean, it seems kind of weird. And obviously part of Danchenko's troubles were due to the fact that he was kind of oddly distancing himself to Dolan, which he was kind of lassoed into that, I think, because he had been made a confidential human source, and he was trying to backpedal a little bit. But it is a little bit strange. I don't really understand the whole mechanism where Dolan's all of a sudden giving him information, and it seems odd, right? It seems odd that somebody affiliated with the Clinton campaign is giving information to the primary subsource of the dossier, and he's playing it off like, I was just watching TV, and Danchenko said he needed something, I just gave it to him, no big deal, and that seems odd.
Sorry, I don't think that's as odd as the FBI higher-ups denying their analyst and their agent permission to run that down and investigate and make sure that there's nothing there. That to me, in the Danchenko trial, was the biggest takeaway, that the higher-ups stepped on them. And Otten actually apparently was on board with investigating Dolan a little bit further. And maybe Dolan did nothing wrong, maybe he knew nothing. But, I mean, we're talking about it takes nothing to open on someone. We've established that. So why would you not, unless there was some political pressure, unless there's something we don't know about that maybe he was already cooperating? That's a possibility. It's a hall of mirrors, but I think that's an open question, and I'd like to know the answer to.
There's certainly more of a predicate on Dolan than there was when they opened Crossfire Hurricane in the first place.
Absolutely. And I think a fourth point, and this would be me, and we might disagree on this one, it would be matters related to Manos Antonakakis, David Dagan, and Rodney Joffe. And we might agree a little bit more on Joffe at least, but there is something weird here. And the fact that they're associated with the Alpha allegations, and then, as Dagan's attorney noted, apparently the Department of Justice a couple months later tasked David Dagan to go look at the Alpha allegations, presumably unwitting of the fact that Dagan was the one that gave them the information a couple months prior through Sussman. That seems very odd to me. I mean, that's what his attorney said. He said the Department of Justice went to Dagan to investigate the Alpha matter. So that's very strange to me. And then the fact that they would become associated with Special Counsel Mueller months later. And, they looked at the DNC hack. And I don't think that's insignificant. I mean, this lawyer's putting this under the header of matters that are related to what Special Counsel Durham was looking at. And part of that reads that it is his work on the DNC hack and the attribution that he's looking at. So, there's limited amounts that I can say in public because I don't want to make anybody certain lawyers upset. But I'm not saying that he did anything wrong, but it does have to be looked at. I mean, you just, it's too much of a red flag.
I guess in terms of pushback on that, I mean, I'm not sure how much you dug into the original attribution of the DNC hack, but were you following it in 2016 and 2017 in real time?
Not so much in real time, but obviously we have what CrowdStrike did, and I don't put any weight in that whatsoever. I mean, based on what they threw out there, it was just their own internal analysis, and the FBI had seen none of it. And I actually discount that because they did such a media campaign on it. I mean, it was obvious that Clinton wanted that out there. And then we have the October 7th, 2016 attribution statement, which is obviously important. I mean, that's where the federal government is saying officially that, yes, the Russians hacked the DNC and they're running this interference campaign. And then we have the ICA report, and we don't know what information might have developed between the October period and, the December, January period where they're releasing the ICA report already. But
yeah, okay. I think you're over trivializing the sort of the evidence. I mean, look, I think the situation is not nearly as clear as it should be, and that I haven't seen evidence that is conclusive. But there is evidence. I mean, the malware that was reported to be on the DNC server is characteristic of APT28, and so there's reason to believe that APT28 was inside the DNC server, and they're an active malware group. There's a certain
respectfully, I would disagree because I don't put any weight whatsoever in the sources and methods type of attribution. That just because certain activities were associated or were similar to known activities of GRU, that type of attribution is very, very sketchy because they also did the same thing with typo squatting. There was a MIS.
Sure. But I'm not saying that it's proof. I mean, it's not. I think that they probably overvalued that evidence as constituting a form of proof, but it is evidence. You can't sort of if they didn't put it there, then somebody did put it there, and you're engaged in a major fraud by CrowdStrike, which is not impossible, but you're getting into a much more elaborate theory.
Well,
I mean, another
CrowdStrike could have been it could have just been misled. I mean, if you were to lay a trail of breadcrumbs back to the GRU, it would be very, very easy to do. You just use their tools to do it, and pop up VPN that they use. I'm not saying that happened. I'm saying that is something that can't be discounted because, again, this all is just smoke and mirrors, and it's all super, reacher kind of in-depth, IC kind of stuff. And I don't know how we'll ever get to the bottom of that.
Okay. No, we're on the same page there. But I'm just saying that. But I just think that it's frustrating. Or at least I think that the agencies should put everything out there. I mean, they hide everything under sources and methods, but it's hard to believe that some information on APT28 techniques in 2016 have any continuing sources and methods secrecy. I mean, why not put everything out there? I mean, in an ordinary hack, there's far more information about how the hacking was done than there is for this one.
Absolutely.
And that's something that the House could practically do, is say, let's remove the mystery from this. Let's show people, and if it shows, maybe it proves what they were saying all along, but that's fine. It sort of settles, it stops people from worrying about it.
Absolutely. And I think there's an argument to be made that even if it was the Russians, I think the disclosure of that to answer all the questions that people have is more important than any possible information that we could give up on their sources and methods. I mean, to your point, I mean, how valuable is information from 7 years ago on methods? And, we have a lot of private actors, private entities out there that are releasing reports pretty regularly on the different sources and methods that the GRU are using. So it's not like, something in the similar vein. Like, I don't think it's going to be that much value. Plus, I mean, we're obviously at a very adversarial position with Russia right now. It's not like, we're going to be best friends anytime soon. So I don't think it's going to change anything for, Russians out there. They're not going to be incentivized to change their methods or like go on some hacking spree or something.
Yeah,
pretty busy right now.
Right. And if anything, I mean, I think that there's a real case that the whole Russiagate fiasco. I mean, that the worst result was not domestic to the United States, but the deterioration of international relationships based on what may very well have been a fraudulent exercise by the FBI. So I mean, it's not, I don't know that, but it sure, to the extent that there was a Russiagate hoax where Trump was represented as a Manchurian candidate, and that was clearly a hoax. I mean, but that has been that's had catastrophic international relations impacts.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. And, I mean, I have a lot of questions about whether or not whether there was a hack by any adversarial actors at all, because it just, obviously we don't have to go through the litany of issues around there, whether they're reusing the known IP address of GRU, or, they're using a Russian VPN service, and, the litany of issues we talked about extensively. But, the fact that they pushed this story out there on June 14th, and then 6 days later, Steele writes his first dossier memo. I mean, you basically just primed the environment to be very receptive to anybody that's coming forward and saying, hey, I have information about Russian collusion. I mean, that was the effect. Whether, there was some scheme or some plan or not, it was certainly the effect that as soon as Steele came forward and said, hey, FBI, I got this information, they were going to be much more receptive to it.
Yeah, although the attempt to sort of ratchet up the Russia card started really a couple of months earlier, and I think that sort of the market for sort of Trump as Putin's bitch was created in Democrat media, it intensified in April. When Trump questioned NATO, and that he seemed to have touched a third rail of U.S. politics when he did that. And so all the Ukrainian hawks came down on him and joined up with the Democrats to try to portray Trump as Putin's bitch as an election strategy, which is lingering with us still.
Absolutely. Daniel, what's up, man?
Hey, welcome back.
Thank you.
I'm very excited. I already saw a couple threads going, and I love it. So one thing I was thinking about, and it's relating back to the church commission that's going to be set up, is it's presumably going to be a bipartisan commission. So what kind of Democrats are we looking at that might be appointed to this commission? And will they be interested in investigating these kind of abuses, or will they just be roadblocks in this? Because I know that the Church Commission was a very bipartisan investigation, so that's one of the reasons they had so much success.
This will not be a bipartisan investigation.
Yeah.
And I will almost guarantee you Adam Schiff is going to be on this committee. It's going to be ugly. But I think the J6 brings up some interesting. It brings up some interesting payback opportunities, but again, I don't know if that's a good idea either. Like, you want to just turn this into a fight immediately? I don't know.
I mean, I would recommend somebody like Rashida Tlaib or AOC for the church committee.
Just for the optics?
No, quite seriously. I mean, I think they're more likely, actually the best one of them would be Ilhan Omar. I mean, she'd have some.
That would be very interesting.
I mean, she'd have some. That's where you sort of have a right and left convergence in a sort of some concern over the surveillance state.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking a little bit, but there's just really not a lot of Democrat politicians that are, that kind of age of the Democratic Party is kind of past where they cared about, the FBI abuse, surveillance by the government.
I'm trying to. There's a California congressman who kind of at least objected to some of the Twitter stuff. Ro Khanna, is that?
Yes, you're right.
I mean, he'd be somebody.
Yeah, I'd like to see him on it.
He'd be somebody. I mean, if I were Massey or somebody like that, that's the sort of guy you'd want on it. But yeah, if Massey, I don't. I mean, try to get him, Ilhan Omar, get somebody else with sort of immigrant. Maybe there's somebody in a sort of in an RFK Jr. kind of school.
Well, the problem is the Democrats get to pick their own members, so. Unless we go down the J6 road and they say Adam Schiff is going to be a witness in this, so he is not going to be welcome. And you know what? The best thing that might happen is it could be a reverse of the J6, and the Democrats say we're not letting anybody on this committee, and then it's just run by Republicans. And yeah, that would be super politicized. But on the other hand, we might get a lot more done.
No, I just had one other question on that. What was you hinted you had gotten a response from the AG of Georgia about the missing subfolder and files that were transmitted to DOJ and Mueller? What was his exact reply? And are you following up with that? Is that going to be part of the lawsuit?
Yeah. So this was actually something I sent to Georgia Tech, and it was around the time that we found that out for the first time, that they had lost some documents or they couldn't find these documents that were being asked for. This is, I think,
really interesting here, how this is just gone.
Yeah. It is a little bit troubling. I mean, especially because whoever it was, I think it was David Dagan.
The most problem is they're relying on it as a basis for reasons why they should be receiving legal payments by the university, and they can't provide any evidence of it.
I sent 3 very long emails to the Georgia AG, and I basically said, in the first one, I was like, DARPA's saying they didn't approve this. What's the basis?
And you're claiming that this existed or something. Could that be fraud? For instance,
yeah, he wants $500,000 from the state of Georgia. That's what he wants. And I'm like, no, this is crazy, because it's not clear to me that Georgia Tech approved this. And if they didn't approve it, there's one section in one of the letters where DARPA stepped forward, where they're putting this on DARPA, and DARPA's like, no, we didn't approve it either. So it's like, what is the possible basis that you're claiming for $500,000, and then you have no documents? I submitted an open records request to David Dagan personally. I sent many to Georgia Tech. There are no documents. That's what they're representing. They have 0 documents on anything. and they want $500,000.
I don't know how you could just do that. It's literally just going to someone say, hey, I have all this, but yeah, it doesn't, I can't prove it, but yeah, it's there. Trust me.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, that's a hot button for me. Sorry, go ahead, Steve.
Well, just to say, I mean, you've had miraculous success with Georgia Tech and the FOIAs. I mean, about 15 years ago, we did FOIAs for climate data with climate scientists, and the institutions just stonewalled everything, and Chris Horner did a lot of FOIAs for letters, the universities contested every FOIA request, denied everything. The fact that Georgia Tech has been so forthcoming in their FOIA productions is really pretty surprising. I mean, it's nice that you got it, but don't be surprised. Don't be surprised if I mean, it's actually kind of weird given the previous performance of universities that Georgia Tech has been so forthcoming, and I guess it's just that they just really, it seems to me like they really wanted to wash their hands of it and just didn't want to get in the midst of any controversy. But also in terms of how much weight to put on the statement of the lawyer that this was part of his original contract. I mean, they're arguing that in order to get the university to pay for it, whether it was really true or not. I don't know. I mean, we'll see how much. It seemed like it sure doesn't seem to me like and this is, and I'm agreeing with your point on this, that their efforts to do stuff with Joff in 2016 to smear Trump. I mean, it was part of his DARPA employment. I mean, it seems pretty far-fetched, but on the other hand, that's how, they need to say that to get their legal fees. But I just wouldn't conclude that because they say that it was really true.
Well, and I posed this question a little bit. I'm starting to wonder about fraud statutes, because
that's what I was just thinking about.
If you make representations that are fraudulent in nature or incorrect, and the inducement of payment of $500,000 in legal fees, that seems like there's got to be a fraud charge there. Or Georgia has certain laws around False Claims Act. So if you make a claim with the state of Georgia that results in financial losses for taxpayers, that gets you into hot water. And it's like, can you really throw away an immunity agreement? And it's like, that's why I don't know if he's lying. I don't know if I can say he's lying, because there's so much that he's risking if he's wrong.
Well, no, he can be wrong without being fraudulent. I mean, he could believe that, he could certainly believe that he was doing that as part of his DARPA duties, that they were trying to get this big contract for Georgia Tech, and that he was sort of doing this stuff for Joff. That he was doing this stuff for Joff just as a favor, or as as a promotion to get the big contract and to get the data for the big contract, and so it was all part of one piece, and some, I could, a court might not agree with that, but by the same token, it wasn't, it's not necessarily fraudulent to argue it or claim it.
Well, you have to prove it. You have to prove it, and DARPA is saying
claim of the files, like that they exist there and they have no record of them.
DARPA's saying they didn't approve this at all, and DARPA's saying they really don't have any records apparently related to this incident. So it's like DARPA just, whoever it was, and I think it's specific to probably 3 or 4 individuals. I think they were just cutouts. I don't think they were acting in an organizational capacity. I think they were acting in some type of unofficial capacity just to take this information and feed it to the Department of Justice. And I don't think the agency or the leadership at the agency really knew about it. I mean, that's what, based on my read.
DARPA's been very consistent in their claims of denial, but their claims of denial aren't looking very strong.
That's
from
right.
what we see.
Yeah. I had another point that one concern that I have is that we don't even get to this stuff at all, because there are these other investigations out there that Republicans have talked about, and they might want to get into Hunter Biden stuff. They might want to do this and that, and once you start dividing your resources, then all of a sudden you don't really have the muscle to go and pursue Russiagate like you should. But the Hunter Biden stuff, that's going to be temporary. Once Biden's out of office, I mean, you're not looking at influence peddling. There might be some money laundering and stuff. That's is what it is. I'm not saying it's not a worthwhile investigation. I'm just saying when you have limited resources and time, this stuff that we're talking about here with Russiagate, with the Department of Defense, with the data collection and data mining, and the issues around the DNC hack and everything that happened, that's the worthwhile investigation. I mean, if we went through everything we went through as a country for multiple years with nightly just 24/7 news coverage blasting us about how Russia and Trump were colluding together, there has to be a reckoning. I mean, if there's a there, we need to find it, and we need to have some accountability, and maybe nobody goes to prison for it, but we need to know.
Agreed. I think there's also a lack of just the members that are currently in the Congress. There's not a lot of them that were on those committees, the House Intelligence and Judiciary, when they were back in 2017 and 2018. A lot of those members have been either went to the White House, other positions, or resigned, like Nunez. So that's also one factor that I was thinking about.
Well, I mean, to the extent that Russiagate, I think you're right that it's going to be a pretty small percentage of what the committee will look at. I mean, things like the coordination with social media is going to, and Hunter Biden. I think realistically, those are both going to be bigger sources of current interest, and Russiagate is pretty far in the rearview mirror. Although I 1,000% agree with you that there ought to be a reckoning on it, and that its impact on foreign policy and international relationships is far greater than the Hunter Biden stuff, or the Facebook stuff, or the Facebook Twitter stuff. But which probably means that to the extent that our corner can formulate objectives, it would be to pick things that are pretty finite and that can get results fairly quickly for a committee. I mean, without having to kind of reinvent the wheel. I mean, and again, I go back to sort of, looking back at the 3 or 4 big trigger points in the Russiagate affair, and how those got off the ground. I mean, without trying to interview Comey or McCabe or these guys, but just try to get some of these. What did they actually know in October? What did they know in December? What did they know at the ICA? I mean, just unredact this stuff. Anyway, that's my take.
Yeah,
No,
I agree. I wonder if we shouldn't, there's some discussions going on, about what we can do and advocate for. And it's like, how do you break down topics that are as massive as they are? And I almost wonder if we should do it at like the subpoena level. And instead of saying, you got to look at the ICA's, relatively intact, maybe you can just say ICA report, but on some of the other stuff, like maybe the DNC hack attribution, maybe there's, maybe we can come up with like 5 or 10 subpoenas and just say, yeah, you got to look at the DNC hack attribution, but okay, here's like 10 subpoenas. If we had the authority, these are the 10 things that we would look at related to the DNC hack attribution. And maybe that's a consideration we could have.
I mean, you just said, well, I mean, or a simpler thing would just, like they produced 900 pages to the Ty Clevenger FOIA on DNC and just say, just release all of the, release the Ty Clevenger FOIA unredacted.
Yeah.
I think sorry.
Just, and for the House committee to figure out how they're going to maneuver in to issue unredacted documents and in a society where only the J6 committee gets to issue unredacted documents.
Yeah, I think it's a good exercise for us to, what do we want right now? What are our priorities? Because maybe that'll mean something. And why don't we poll anybody else that wants to speak too? If you want to jump up here, let's hear it. Like if you had to pick one document or one subpoena, what would it be? Like Stephen, Daniel, jump in. If you had to pick one, what would it be? Ryan, what do you think?
Sorry, I missed part of that. Like, which topics would I be interested?
If you, like narrow it down. Like, what would be one very specific topic, one document, one subpoena, somebody that you want to put on the stand? What would it be and why?
I don't know if I could do one, but I mean, obviously, a big focus for me is probably Rodney Joffe and just his relationship to the entirety of our government, and his involvement in basically everything, and packet forensics. Any data that they provided that was used for DNC hack attribution.
I think if I had to pick like one person, it would probably be a Peter Strzok that actually would answer the question. Like if we could go back to like 2017, 2018 and actually depose him, like with all that we know now, I think because he was a very big part in all that, I think we'd come up with a lot more than we have.
He wouldn't answer anything.
Yeah, that's I think if he was forced to, but like subpoenaed, that to be, and that the FBI actually allowed him to answer. If we had gotten something like that, I think we would have learned a lot more. But they didn't do anything to push back against the DOJ's claims of, he's part of active investigation, but he was not on investigation anymore. It was months ago, so the stuff they was there for. So why can't we learn about it?
I guess if I were listing things, I'd like to see the FBI intelligence memo on the Steele dossier that was written in October of 2016. At least I believe that there was such a thing, and that it was the common background to the FISA and to the March talking points. I'd like to see the Senate Intel, the total unredaction of the Senate Intel Committee report on how they supposedly knew that Russia was helping Trump. There's 20 pages of redacted information now. I'd like to see the documents on the Danchenko CHS negotiation and offer. Well, I just divided myself into three. I don't think it's one, but I mean, just making practical lists. I mean, those are all fine. Those are things I'd like to see.
Yeah, I didn't know we could do sub bullet points, but
especially
if I had
the Danchenko becoming a CHS, how that happened.
Yep.
There'll be a document trail. There has to be a document trail for that.
My 1B, my sub point would be probably information on Ilya Sachkov and Sergei Mikhailov and their involvement in whatever happened. I have no idea. We have no clue. There's we vaguely understand that it's associated with the DNC hack, but we have no idea anything. So,
I mean, we don't know whether it is. I mean, for listeners, how many do listeners as a whole know the Mikhailov story? I mean, I mean, this is the total hall of mirrors. I'll give my 60-second summary, assuming that most people don't know what that was about. But um, shortly after, in December of 2016, two medium level or senior officials of FSB were arrested in Russia as being CIA spies. And one of the alternate theories of the DNC hack is that, and this relates to the attribution to GRU. So, for example, it may be possible to attribute it to Russia, but how do we know that it was the GRU as opposed to the FSB? And if it was the FSB, then you have the interesting situation where the responsible officers in the FSB are probably CIA agents. So you really have kind of the whole thing sort of in a one of these sort of. So you've got Brennan sort of instructing the FSB agents who are doing the DNC hack, who then blame the GRU for it all, and or maybe not at all. But that's where the Mikolov and Dokuchev were the FSB officials in question, and it's a total, it just makes your head spin trying to think it through.
Yeah, I can't believe we haven't gotten any hints of that. I mean, I don't know, if that was all CIA or wherever that information might have come into, or whether there was information, or whether it's just some story that Russia's spinning, and at the same time, I mean, they were arrested for something, and
they're arrested. They're in jail.
Yeah, they haven't been seen in like 6 years. Yeah, yeah, that's a tough one. Ilya Sachkov actually was just arrested, I think, a couple years ago.
Which one?
I think Ilya Sachkov. I think he was just arrested a couple years ago.
He was arrested, and that.
Yeah,
Kozlovsky's another one. I got contacted. I got an email from Kozlovsky a few years ago.
And I didn't like commissary money, or did he want commissary money, or get him out?
No. I'd written a blog article. I'd written a blog article in which I had noticed some overlap in the infrastructure between the Lurk banking gang and APT-28. It was really weird. And a couple of weeks later, or sometime later, Kozlovsky noticed this, and I think he'd already been arrested, but he seemed to be able to communicate. Kozlovsky seems to be able to have more access to social media and email than J6 protesters. And he sent me an email sort of inviting me to ask questions, and he and to prove that it was Kozlovsky himself, he sent me an email from one of the email addresses that was one of the had been cited as the Lurk banking gang infrastructure, and one of the that was connecting. So I had been kind of wondering whether there was what the connection was between just these ordinary commercial hackers and APT-28. And I mean, again, it's one of these mysteries. And one there's another story of the DNC hack which nobody talks about much. Are you familiar with the Act Blues hack?
I haven't looked at it recently. I think I'm vaguely aware of it. Yeah.
Well, what that was is that they set up Act Blues was a typo squat of the Democrat donation site actblue.com, and at one point they hijacked the DCC web page to divert donors to the actblue.com page, or the actblues.com page, which was going to be sort of sending the donations to a Russian criminal organization. or supposedly Russian criminal, and so there was a battle back and forth between, and this was on this sort of hacking of the DCC webpage was taking place after the CrowdStrike announcement on June 15th. So this is on June 16th that they said that this is still going on DCC. Now, exactly why sort of Putin's top hackers were taking time out of their espionage of the DNC to try to hijack the Democrat donation page, it seems like an odd activity.
That wasn't new either. They were doing that as far back as like 2004. The same, like the Operation Firewall guys. I can't remember who, but which hackers. But that was like that goes back to hacking the election committees. They did both parties, I think. So, like that should have been on everybody's radar screen. That's not it's like a new idea to come up with.
No, but this wasn't surveillance hacking. This was hacking.
Hacking what? Cash. Yeah, taking donations. Yeah, cash. It goes. The 2004 election that was going on, and it was
that right?
Linked to Russians. Yeah. I'll send you the links.
Yeah. Okay, that's it. Yeah. And even some of these guys. I mean, it's hard to and which ones are Russians and which ones are Ukrainians, and they're all probably in term as criminal organizations, are all probably indistinguishable.
Intentionally, they were being they would say Russian when it could mean anyone Eastern European. So it's especially difficult to put blame on anyone.
Yeah, I was chatting with talking with Fool Nelson about Maxim Popov, who's one of his favorites, and Popov is always represented as Russian, but he comes from Western Ukraine and from a oblast where Stepan Bandera is sort of probably more celebrated than almost anywhere else in Ukraine. So the idea that this guy is, anybody from Western Ukraine is probably more Ukrainian than Russian.
Might open it up for a couple questions. I don't think we want to do a crazy long chat tonight, but add speaker here. Hey, Persia, what's up?
Hey guys, great work. I'm glad you're keeping up the good fight. I would subpoena John Durham. I want all his communications, and then after that, I want Mueller's, and then I want Huber's, and the whole seventh floor. But anyway, I was just wondering, like, in terms of legal exposure, like, it sounds like there's some we're kind of divided here about who wants to see documents versus, who wants to still go for prosecutions. I'm assuming we're talking primarily about like Mueller team and after, because, no one before that, statute of limitations. Like, but even if we go all the way back to 2016, like, who would have ever had possible legal exposure? Like, I mean, I used to listen to Dan Bongino a lot, and from what I could tell, you could really only nail people with, like, for example, the Woods file. Like, there's the Woods procedures, right? Like, you have to sign off on that. Someone has to swear that everything in it is, been validated or checked out and accurate and all that. And so you could actually go for somebody criminally. Otherwise, there'd have to be a conspiracy, basically, because everyone else, could just be, you could chalk it up to, like, incompetence, right? Malfeasance instead of misfeasance and whatever. We've seen what happened inside Twitter. You didn't need to have a bunch of people saying, hey, let's go take down all the Trump haters or the Trump lovers. Let's go take down all the MAGA people. But that's what happened, right? Like, you didn't need everybody to collude and say, hey, let's do this and take out this person and work together, to have that effect, to totally, rig the election or tilt the election. So I'm just wondering, like, in terms of charges, like, against, like, what kind of charges would you expect to be able to lay other than or are there any other than conspiracy besides, like I said, the signing off on the Woods procedure for the FISA warrants and everything? Apparently Rod Rosenstein already said it's not him that, even though he signed off on it, he said, oh, the other people, they had to do their job and I just signed off on it. So he admitted that he didn't read the whole thing and all that. So could they even play the game with the Woods procedure and everything?
Yeah. So,
Glenn Simpson lied to Congress.
Right.
Yeah.
Just saying.
That's
really for statute of limitations. It's not a big issue. It's really the issue of whether or not Durham has the evidence, because if Durham had evidence of a conspiracy, there's plenty of overt acts that would extend the statute of limitations. Presumably, for several years. We could have at least easily 6 months, depending on who you include in that conspiracy or who was acting at the, to advance that conspiracy. There's still a case. He could still bring charges. The problem is, he's lost 2 cases, so he doesn't have a whole lot of political cover to go and pursue criminal charges at this point. As of October, he told Rodney Joffe that he will not be charging Rodney Joffe. So, what that means for his case, what that means for John Durham, I don't know. It's obviously a point of speculation, but that would seem to suggest that Durham is done. At the same time, it's been 2 months and we haven't heard about Durham's report yet. So it's hard to say for sure. There's plenty of, conspiracy type predicate offenses that you could potentially see, but a lot of that's going to be evidence based. Whether you could conclude that the Alpha Bank data was fraudulent or spoofed, that could be a criminal charge. If you could say the same thing about the DNC hack, obviously that's a huge predicated offense. If you could say conclusively that there's criminality at the FBI, if you could say, somebody told Kevin Kleinsmith to alter that document to advance the conspiracy, yeah, you could see some of that. But something like a Woods file, that's really gonna be contingent on what do other Woods files looks like, right? For cases unrelated to what we've been, talking about with Russiagate and stuff. Are those files in similar fashion, or does it look like, is there typical FBI incompetence, or is this, something that's specific to this case that's indicative of, malfeasant, intentions? So.
Yeah,
Steve, go ahead.
In terms of what we know in terms of, say, the Woods files in particular, the guys that are signing these things are program manager schlubs in DC. They don't know anything much about it. They're paper pushers. They're not criminals. And I just don't see that as nothing's going to happen on that. And nor should it really, because they're some guy like Ryan Gaynor or somebody like that or Richard Maines, whoever the people were that were doing it, were not involved in anything very untoward. In terms of things that I think are particularly offensive, and in terms of false information, but has mostly passed under the radar, was in March of 2017, when the FBI and Department of Justice start briefing Congress, and this is just leading up to Comey's March 20th, 2017 speech, where he sort of basically takes the whole Russiagate hoax public and really starts the ball rolling for Mueller and sort of decapitating the Trump administration. They were still repeating almost word for word untrue statements about the Steele network validity that had been made in October. In March of 2017, they were saying that the subsource was Russian-based, and that the FBI had no control over him. at the very moment when they knew that Danchenko was living in Northern Virginia, and they were about to make him a FBI confidential human source. So, I mean, that was, in my opinion, that was a far worse lie than anything in the Carter Page files, and one that had far more dramatic impact because it sets the stage for this sort of national bloodletting that took place, and now the problem with somebody like you'd sort of say, well, who's at fault there? Well, Lisa Page, it turns out, was the lead author of the talking points, and Lisa Page probably wasn't familiar with the details of the. She probably didn't even know about Danchenko. So she wasn't up to date on the investigation. She was reading off of a FBI intelligence memo that at that point was 5 months old and hadn't been updated. So was she at fault? Well, she was relying on the documents she had available to her. I mean, you'd have thought that somewhere in the 5 top FBI officials and 5 top DOJ officials that reviewed this document that they'd have known better, but I guess they'd all say they didn't know. And that was the question that Barr asked 3 years ago after Horowitz, and we still don't know. But I mean, but those March 2017 papers that really ratcheted up the whole tension were those were concealed by the FBI for years and years and years, and it just came out accidentally in the Sussman exhibits. Oh, speaking of documents that we should be asking for, how about the exhibits to the Danchenko trial, which Durham hasn't released? And they could release them because they released all the exhibits to the Sussman trial, but they've kept everything. Durham hasn't released anything from the exhibits of Danchenko, and the exhibits in Sussman, the exhibits are way more interesting than the trial.
No, that's true. We at the trial we asked where we could find them, when they were going to be released, and we got we were referred to what was the guy's name, Horatio Kornblow or whatever his name was, that is in charge of that stuff, and a lot of people have been asking, and they have not released it, and it's intentional. So I couldn't tell you why. Not for lack of asking.
Yeah, and I mean, it's for those people that I think really undercuts the idea that Durham in the Danchenko trial was trying to sort of run a narrative that he's trying to get information out to the public through the obstruction of Merrick Garland and the DOJ, and was using this stupid charge that he had to put a narrative out there. Well, if that was his objective, then he would have put all these exhibits out on day one and without having to be asked. And the fact that he had
that's assuming he had control of that. We don't know the ins and outs of what he's being told, or who's in control.
Well, I suppose we can't deduce from the fact that he could release it with Sussman. Maybe they said, "Oh, well, that was a disaster letting the Sussman exhibits out, so you're not going to let out the Danchenko exhibits." I guess that's possible. But it also was a bit of stage managing too, because in some cases, I think the exhibits stay within the court for a period of time, and there are two classes of exhibits. There are ones that were introduced in the trial, and ones that weren't. And in Sussman, we got both of them, or mostly both, or a lot of the ones that weren't. But in the Danchenko, we didn't even get the exhibits that were introduced into trial. I mean, it's just madness.
Yeah, the response we got, the trial is still ongoing, but we were indicated we'd be able to get at least some or most of them, and none of them came out. So take that for what it's worth. I couldn't tell you anything why that would be, aside from, maybe there is some reason that they were withheld?
Well, I've tried. Yeah, I mean, Ivan Pentuchkov of Epoch Times was the person who got the assessment exhibits, and he tried hard in this one, but he got nowhere.
Can I just say, I want to agree that, I mean, there needs to be a reckoning for this. This was the worst thing of the century in politics, in my opinion. I think everybody in here agrees. Like, just the worst dirty trick, the worst scandal, whatever you want to call it. Like, it totally turned the country upside down. It totally exposed the deep state. It totally exposed the media. It just exposed everyone. And, but it's, there more needs to be exposed, obviously. And, like you say about like Kleinsmith, like, he had to have been, someone put him up to that. Like, who would do that when they have to answer to, superiors like that? Unless it was like it reminds me of Twitter. Like, I don't know if it reminds you all of Twitter. Like, I don't think there was a conspiracy, like, where people were overt about, like, we're going to do this and do that to get Trump. It's just the environment, just like at Twitter, where it's all anti-Trump, and it was anti-Trump there, and they just went through like just something like, I mean, we know they're like 95%, libs, and it's like Trump wins and they're totally traumatized, right? Like probably diagnosable PTSD, right? And they just, all of them, whenever something, and it was all handled by the seventh floor too, right? None of the stuff, from what I understand, ever like came up organically the way that it's supposed to from like field offices, right? It's like the seventh floor kept it out of everybody else's hands. And then they, anytime something came across somebody's desk, they looked at it, and they looked at it with the most, biased opinion. And like anytime they could have any kind of all they need is plausible deniability, right? They could say, oh, I was having problems at home, I don't know why I made that decision here. Oh yeah, sorry, I made a mistake, whatever. They can all say that, pass it on to the next person's desk, all kept in the seventh floor. And they all know what they're doing. They all know what each other are doing, and they all know what the goal is. It's not hard to figure out, and I mean, what's with the stuff from Obama? What's with Strzok's text? There were two text messages, right? One from Page, one from Strzok. One of them is White House is running everything, and POTUS wants to know everything we're doing, right? Like, so, I mean, is there an innocent explanation for that? Like, what? Like, is it anything else Strzok could have been talking about in Page in those messages? Like, I mean, that's ultimately what it is you always want to go as high up as you can, because who is directing all of this? Like, if anybody, like, were people, was money involved, I guess, or people expecting things if they did things like, I obviously want to know what Obama did, like knew and didn't know, because apparently he got this briefing from, his CIA director, and then like, way before it even happened. So he must have known as soon as this stuff started, being communicated to him later on. And the FBI gets the information from CIA. They know that Russia knows that Hillary's trying to do this trick. Like, it's just so ridiculous. But like I say, how do you catch them? Yeah, I don't know if you're ever going to catch them. Just need to get the information out, like you guys are saying. The repercussions are going to be political at this point, and they should pay the political price for it. And the FBI needs to be, totally rethought, and new procedures, just like have been done before, new procedures need to be implemented. And it's like, like you're not going to nail them. You're gonna. Is it possible that Durham really was like? Did he think he was going to get convictions in DC? Like, come on, he didn't think he was going to, right? I know he's supposed to, and he's got to run them by Garland, I guess. But those were to get information, right? Like, tell me he did all that mostly to get information for his report, right? Because he wants to blow up the whole thing, right? He wants to like expose as much as he can. That's what he would do if he was a smart man, right?
Well, let me say this. All right. Durham, in that sense, is behind the eight ball. And I think you hit a lot of nails on the head. And if you're going to get a conspiracy conviction, how are you going to do that unless somebody flips? Somebody that is in the room that can say, yeah, this person, this person, this person. We all agreed to do this thing. When a lot of this stuff, these are sophisticated operators. They didn't even be told, hey, look, do this, do that. I think a lot of, and I think there was some things that happened where there were absolutely like somebody said, hey, do this for this reason. But a lot of it's just, you know what to do. I don't need to tell this person that this is what they need to do for the good of not the country, but our standing, Donald Trump should not be president, and therefore, the resistance thing that is documented, it was being pushed. There were congressmen, there were, politicians that were all over saying, yeah, the resistance exists. We are going to stop him any way possible at every turn. So you didn't need to tell people to do certain things. And that makes convicting them really impossible because you didn't have an overt, you have to have a commitment. You have to have at some point to get a conspiracy conviction, an agreement. And that has to be, something that actually happened, not just, I knew what the right thing to do was, so I did it. So that's not a conspiracy. So I see the problem here, unless you flip someone, unless you get them to say, I was in the room when this agreement happened, it's going to be really hard to get a conviction. So I think that might be a big problem for what Durham's been up to. And, but as you say, that doesn't mean we can't all find out the truth and find out people were doing things that they knew were wrong and doing things that they knew were illegitimate. And maybe the best thing we can do is all find out about them.
Hey, real quick, does anyone remember if part of Kleinsmith's plea deal, he had to talk with the Durham review team at the time?
Yeah, I think he had to.
I know he talked to the OIG, but I don't know if it was specifically that he had to talk to the Durham, because he wasn't in a criminal investigation at that time. Or, no, it was, but I don't know if he had to cooperate. I don't know.
I think he's supposed to, but it's a great point because they had him dead to rights on the Moscow or Russia-based. They never prosecuted him for saying he was Russia-based.
I can't believe that.
I think if given that you're never going to nail these people in court, right? You're never going to get any smoking guns of conspiracy. I think you still want to go as high as you can to the top, right? Just like you would do with prosecutions, right? You want to flip people, get to the top. I think Durham wants to get to the top, at least of knowing what was done, but then again, if he's not really looking at crimes, is he allowed to look? Can he look at the stuff Obama said when technically Obama isn't committing a crime? He's just committing, an abuse of power, which isn't a crime.
Barr said that he was not going to be looking at Obama. And
that's right.
It's not exactly what he said. He said he didn't expect the investigation to result in criminal charges for Obama or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
He did. Durham did talk to Brennan for 8 hours, though.
Yeah.
And we also have to remember for future FOIAs that Durham also, during this time, took under his wing, his investigation kind of, I don't know how you'd say it, it took over those littler ones conducted by other U.S. attorneys that Barr spinned off. I know the Clinton investigation, there was reports in the New York Times that Durham took over that one and took those files. So just for future FOIAs, this stuff should be in his special counsel office, including the Bash one that we never saw anything about.
I think we actually got some information on the Bash one.
We did?
Yeah, it was something to the fact that he didn't really find anything.
I know because I heard that, I read the Washington Post one, they say he didn't write a report, he just resigned. But
I'll see if I can find it. There's something out.
Cool.
I say that for this to really go down as well as it did, there might have been, there could have been direction from the top, right? And I mean, there's 2 text messages that, one that for sure, there was a text message, correct me if I'm wrong, that says, White House is running this. Wasn't there the text message that said that?
Yeah, that's true. But I mean,
Yeah, White House is running this, and then look what happened. And Obama knew that that Hillary was doing. I mean, what else do you need to know?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, obviously
they didn't follow up on the. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, no, I'm just it'd be nice to have people testify to it, but beyond that, I don't know how much we're going to learn about that.
I say we just start doing what Hollywood does and make a TV series about the thing.
That's funny. I just do want to say that, we were originally talking about Congress switching hands and the Republicans taking over and what they can do. The Durham is going to turn in his report. It goes to the AG. They have to inform Congress that this happened. That's going to, whatever they deliver to Congress, whether it's everything or not, either way, if they withhold stuff, that's a big scandal. If they give everything, I assume that's going to be some red hot stuff that Durham has. That's going to be huge, and that's going to light a fire. And all the stuff we're talking about, there's lots of things that Congress wants to look at, but this committee that we originally started talking about, this church-style committee, is going to be in place, ready to go, jump on the stuff that Durham delivers to them. Or if his report isn't allowed, they can call him, he can testify to them, and they can just jump on it. They can get going. So I feel more hopeful now than I have in a long time, because all this stuff is lining up, and I think it can all happen.
What about presidential communications? I don't know if it was somebody in this room, but I heard today that everything the president ever hears or communicates, both ways he hears or says is recorded somewhere, like from what I understand.
Yes, there are stenographers on standby. Like even if he speaks to a reporter, like I forgot who it was, somebody wrote this up, where even if he speaks to a reporter, if the president says it's off the record, there's actually a record of it. So even if the reporter's not allowed to take notes or record the conversation, there's actually a stenographer at the White House that actually writes down the conversation and records it. And then that's subject to the Presidential Records Act. So that's eventually released.
Yeah. So how many transitions of power have there been in the history of the country? Peaceful ones. Every single one of them until this one, right? Until 2016. And then it was like the complete opposite. It was sabotage.
Yeah. Let's go to Elizabeth. You've had your hand up for a while.
Thank you. Thanks for having me up. I have a question that
Sure.
I really need to ask, and I totally understand if nobody wants to answer it, but it's something that I wonder about, and that is that all of you who have doggedly pursued the truth on these matters, including, several of the people who are not here on stage. Do you know, and I understand if you don't want to answer, but has anybody faced repercussions? Like, do you have like a new friend that wants to find out what you're doing? Or, I realize you're not in the government or anything, but, it's got to be, you've got to be a thorn in the side of some of these people with all of the information that you've uncovered. Thanks.
Undead, you want to take this?
So the question is whether we've faced repercussions for what we've done?
Yeah, that would be something that I would worry about personally. Other than being banned from Twitter, maybe, but it's just something that I would worry about. And I realize, you use anonymity, which is great, but when you're dealing with the government, I don't know how good that is. So anyways,
I know
if you don't want to answer, that's fine.
I know somebody who got fired by a Fortune 500 company after working there for 10 years because their HR department thought that they might have been in Washington, D.C. on January 6th. But that's obviously not connected to Russiagate, but if that's any, consolation to your question, that there definitely are, monetary consequences happening to people out there.
I'm not sure about the other sleuths, or to what extent. I've certainly gone through some stuff, and one day I might write a book about it, and I'll certainly include some of those anecdotes and some of the stuff that's gone on behind the scenes. But I appreciate the question, and MB or Steve, I don't know if you guys want to jump in.
Yeah. Well, I know ever since back in climate days that people have tried to figure out how to attack me, but if you don't work, if you work independently, or if you're got your own money, or you're retired, then it's harder to get at you. So I haven't suffered any consequences.
Yeah, I've been pretty fortunate. Not that way. Yeah, the best advice I can give, and I think we all try, is not to say anything you don't. Couch everything with, this is what I think, this is what things indicate, and make sure you don't besmirch anyone, say anything that is not defensible. But that goes for anything in life. I mean, do your best not to accuse anyone of anything that is not 100% ironclad. And even if it is, just channel the lawyer in you and do the best thing, because it's really, I think we could all agree and speak to this, that, sometimes you think things are 100% in your mind, and you find out, actually that it seemed like this is an impossible coincidence, but sometimes it is. And, putting somebody on blast like that, and, possibly, incurring issues in their lives is not a good idea. And it's a horrible thing to do to someone. So I think it's just good to be careful. And unfortunately, there are people out there that don't give a shit about that. And they are bad actors, and they probably will try to take you down. So, don't do anything that you can't live with the consequences of. And don't, this is a tough business.
Yeah. But then again, you only live once.
Yeah. You only have one country.
So, but I mean, if you're gonna talk about, like, let's say, I mean, if you're talking about like liability, like if somebody worrying about somebody's gonna sue you or something like that, I mean, the laws are like it's really hard you can't sue somebody for saying something, even if it's completely false, if they're talking about like a famous person or something and you're a nobody, right? From what I understand.
Well, it's tough because sometimes the punishment is the process is the punishment. So do you want to deal with that and have to hire a lawyer and go through all these things? I mean, that sucks. No one wants to have to do that.
Let me put it this way. Let me put it this way. Obama is not an American citizen. Am I in trouble?
Time will tell.
Obviously, I don't believe that. I'm just saying that to be provocative. But my point is, but I know what you're saying about if you have a job, you got to worry about your job, of course.
Yeah, and look, you can sue people. I mean, Michael Mann sued Mark Stein, Rand Simberg, American Enterprise Institute, and National Review for libel in 2012, and it's actually it's been in the courts for 9 years, and it's coming to trial soon. And so, I mean, it's cost the defendants hundreds of thousands of dollars. So yeah, I mean, and they haven't even got to trial yet. So yeah, these things you can sue people. And I agree with one point that MB made, which is a very good one. And I would say that this is true for sort of most of the people in our corner of Twitter, is just, you don't say stupid stuff. You can cut out the extra adjective that gets you into trouble. Whatever point you want to make, you can generally make it stronger by laying out the facts in a coherent basis and let people draw their own conclusions. You can lay them out in a very damning way so that there's only one conclusion to be drawn, but that if every fact in it is but it's lathering on the extra adjectives about somebody being a fraud or somebody being a liar that gets you into trouble. You can show that the person's a fraud by the facts and let other people draw their own conclusions.
Yeah, if you think about somebody like really powerful trying to crush somebody really small for saying something really, in a really small corner of like nowhere. It's going to be pretty embarrassing for the person who's bringing a lawsuit like that, right? If it's obviously frivolous, right?
Well, I mean, Michael Mann sued these people over a blog article that probably 100 people read.
Yeah, and I agree that I agree that you shouldn't libel yourself, but I think, as far as I can tell, libel requires you to say something that's factually incorrect about somebody, right?
I think the point is, do you want to go to court to deal with that? Because if somebody has, a bag of money they can do whatever they want. They can make your life miserable and make you, dig in your savings just to defend yourself on something that might be on its face ridiculous or not defensible. But you might have to, if you go into this, you realize that might happen to you, but do the best you can not to do that to anyone. Not just because it's a bad thing to, because you might get sued, because it's just wrong to do to someone. Just, have some humility and say, these are where the facts seem to lead, and couch your language. And I think that's just my best advice.
Yeah, just in my opinion, like you say, I think one of you said earlier that it's best to just kind of preface everything you say by saying, in my opinion, and just my lay opinion, I think that the orders came from the top, right? And that's just my opinion. So how can somebody, who's going to be like, come after me for clearly just expressing my opinion like that? So anyways, I was just curious about presidential privilege, executive privilege, and all that. Like, it sounds like there's a record of everything that's always said by presidents. Now, how hard is it to get that communication? Like, and what falls under executive privilege and all that?
Well, they can claim executive privilege on just about anything. So, I have a batch of FOIAs with Obama right now, and it's kind of a slower process than typical FOIA even. And at some point, once they collect all the records, they give him the option of asserting executive authority. And then that goes into waters that are somewhat uncharted. And I don't know if that's going to be the case for me, if I have to go to court to go seek some of those records, if they do exert executive privilege, because it's not just Obama. I think the sitting president will have an opportunity to assert executive privilege too. So, I could be up against the Department of Justice if I want to go litigate that. But generally, like after 5 years of being out of office, records start becoming subject to the Presidential Records Act as far as releases go. I think it's another 7 years after that they have broad, quite a bit of deference, I guess would be the word, to whatever they want to keep locked up. And then after 12 years, though, I think there's supposed to be a little bit more of a broader give and take, where they're supposed to start releasing some more of those documents a little bit more freely. So I don't know. I think, once they assert executive privilege on some of the documents I requested, maybe I'll be able to answer that a little bit better if I have to go to court for it.
Real quick, I think I saw you Undead tweet about this, and that's what got me thinking about it. Jaffe, I think a lot of people expected him to be charged, but he was told he was not. And right now, he's in America, you're innocent until proven guilty. So, I thought your tweet about it was very smart, and just want to reiterate. Just know that because it kind of relates to this. So I don't know.
Well, I mean, there's non-criminal abuses and mistakes happen, and whatever you want to call it, that's less than a crime. I mean, there's still reason to look at things, and who knows? I mean, you don't know what'll turn up. Just because once Durham lost that case with Danchenko, I mean, it's going to be very hard for him to bring a case again against anybody. So, we'll see. We'll see what develops. I thought it was really interesting that Jaffe has sued New Star now, seeking $2.6 million to have all his legal expenses paid for. So that's pretty interesting. That once they unseal a little bit more of that docket, I'd like to dig through that and see what Jaffe's arguing as far as his actions being on behalf of New Star in the course of all this. But, at the end of the day, I mean, you still have people out there, and certainly the FBI and the CIA have had some pretty strong negative conclusions about the data and the allegations that were brought to them by Sussman, given to him by, Jaffe or Dagan or whoever it is. But independent people out there, and, I know who Weaponized Autism is, and they have quite a resume themselves. So for Weaponized Autism to go out on a limb and say, yeah, they're fraud, what these allegations are is the product of fraud. I mean, that seems pretty strong. So I don't know. I don't know what will happen. I don't know. Probably should just leave it there. But
One of the things, you know, if Judicial Watch got the 500 pages, and or if they're just holding on to it, like not release, because that's kind of scummy. I'm a little mad about that if they did get it.
No, it's not. So they had a couple of status updates in November and December, and said they were on track for December 30th. They did not give over the documents on December 30th, and then there was just a status update yesterday, and the Department of Justice told them January 10th. So that is Tuesday.
So get them yet.
Yeah, it's not crazy. So hopefully
keep pushing it back.
Yeah, next week we should have the first production, couple hundred pages of documents from that. It's supposed to be 500, but we'll see.
Cool. We're looking forward to it.
Meeser, what's up?
Hey guys, just a couple of questions. Did you happen to catch Kash Patel's show last night?
No, I did not. Was it good?
It was very good, and both he and Jan were talking about the sleuths, and they were mentioning that you guys really should get involved in the Twitter files and looking up the Russiagate information. And I guess back in the day, I used to be an analyst, and I gotta be honest. Right now, I'm on info overload with this, but I do think if you guys can look at those Twitter files, I think that would be a wonderful thing to do. Now, is that something that you think you could do rather quickly if you got access to those files?
Yeah, so that's a great question. We actually had a chat last week, I think it was, with Hans hosting, and Matt came into the chat, and we know Matt pretty well. So we talked about that a little bit, and Matt said he was kind of open to the idea. So that kind of opened the door a little bit, and we'll see. We'll see if Matt wants to bring us in and kind of help him go through some of the documents that he's getting. Sounds like it's sort of a batch system where, it sounds like Matt's given some selectors or whatever you want to call them for requests for document production. And then the Twitter people are actually just giving him just a massive amount of documents all at once for whatever search terms he gives them. So he talked about he still has to do like Lucifer 2.0 and Russiagate stuff, especially. And that obviously that's kind of a natural tie-in with our knowledge base. So we'll see. He certainly doesn't have to bring us in, but we're excited for the possibility.
Yeah, I would pursue that because there's Jan and Kash who, like I said, they were talking about you in the show. It was his show was about 50 minutes long, and you guys were mentioned maybe in the last 10 minutes or so. And Lee Smith occasionally talks about you guys, so I would actually just push that. I think that would be very good. The other thing I wanted to say is not only am I on information overload, I mean, I really have a hard time following things now. And I'm thinking, I think these Congress people will have I don't think they're going to be able to follow. I don't know. My recommendation, and I know this is really, really hard. It's one of the hardest things to do, is to create your elevator speech, for this whole topic, because this whole Russiagate thing has it's worse than a spider's web. I mean, it's like it branches off in 1,000 different directions, and I just think it's really hard to follow now. So I guess my only recommendation would be if you can create that elevator speech where you have to, just succinctly tell a committee member why they need to go down this path. And I know it's really hard. It's really hard to do on this particular topic. And I think that's all I have to say. I would love to see you guys hit those Twitter files, though. I think that would be great.
I want to see the Undead FOIA banning Twitter files.
Yeah, that's the other thing. I shadow banned, and I think I'm shadow banned because I was reached.
Meeser, I think you cut out there.
I think she was shadow banned.
Shadow banned, and then she was muted. What's up with that?
No, but I think she makes an outstanding point.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. that's something that we've been talking about and really need to work on is, just take, and that's why I asked that question earlier, like, what's the one thing that we need? What's this? What's that? Because I think that's what these guys need is like, look, here's our recommendation of where you should start, what you need to ask for, because that'll open all this other stuff up. Otherwise it's too much. There's just too many different directions, and you wait, everything just kind of floods out, and you don't find out you never accomplish anything.
It's so hard, though. It's so hard to boil it down to a short elevator speech. It's like, you're on a very, very long elevator if you want to get through everything that's important. It's just really hard to boil down into a very succinct kind of pitch.
Can I just say something along that lines there? It's also, there's a bunch of sort of, what are they called? False flags that came up, like the Joseph Mifsud. I think everyone's in agreement here about that being a false flag, right? Everything to do with Joseph Mifsud?
Oh, it's a false flag. It was just a dead end.
Yeah, there's nothing there.
Right. Just because I remember watching, listening to Dan Bongino, and I just I'm just worried now about how much that last person said. I can't remember who it was there. Sounded like a female voice. About the web of information, and I'm like wondering like how much of this web now is in my head that's like false, like around this Mifsud stuff, because I list a lot of the all that stuff that Papadopoulos lied about, right? Like in my opinion, right, that I think from my understanding wasn't accurate, that Papadopoulos said. I have to make sure I watch my language, right? But I have his book. I haven't actually read it because luckily I kind of like listened to this corner before I wasted my time reading it. I don't know, maybe there's some good stuff in the book anyways, but like, how much of the things I've heard are actually false, you know what I mean? Like about everything, like Bongino, I think spent at least 25% of his time, from what I remember, talking about a bunch of and Hannity and everybody. Like, think of how many times they talked about how curious it was, this Maltese professor and everything in that whole direction now. Like, I'm wondering how much of that all was he in Cambridge lecturer or something like that? And there's just like all the different connections over there now. Like, I'm like, how much of that is I can't even get it straight in my own head now is my point. And I mean, I don't understand nearly the level that you guys do, but it's like, man, like I was really disappointed when I found out that a lot of what I was listening to is it kind of reminded me now of the whole, I hope there's no QAnon people in here, but the whole QAnon thing and all the, how much time people spent on that before the election, like totally just a brilliant idea. Whoever came up with that, like obviously on the left, and put that out there for all the people to bite, all the people on the right to bite into and like put all their energy into, and they just totally drowned out the legitimate stuff that people should have been questioning before the election. Everyone's talking about voting machines and everything, and they went all crazy. Who knows how much of January 6th was because of that? Total misinformation. Like this kind of crap that makes the world go round. That's what the Maidan coup was. That's what everything was. Like all these different things, all this, every war. I heard someone say every war started because of false information, like in the media, and so just the whole, like I say, it reminds me of the Q thing, like the fake information, this whole, like now that there's this Mifsud stuff, and I don't even know how much, like all the names, like Bongino says, really important to remember the names. That's, if you ever watch Bongino, he's like, remember the names. And I'm like, how many of these names in my head are ones I shouldn't have remembered? Because they were totally false flags.
Yeah. And I mean, that's tough because I think even Papadopoulos, I don't think he was necessarily intending to be wrong. I think he was trying to reconcile a really emotional time in his life with, the broader context, and maybe that was his best attempt at making sense of it. And
he was being steered.
He made a mistake.
He might have been being steered, right?
What's that?
The FBI might have been steering him, right? They might have wanted him to say something.
Yeah, I think there's probably a clear instance where the FBI was looking to hear something, and his life would have gotten quite a bit easier if he would just told them. And that's a tough situation. Those legal expenses run up really, really fast, and that's just a tough spot. So I don't want to be too harsh on him for that. I mean, he's certainly been through the ringer.
How do we know the FBI wasn't just like, didn't put that stuff in his head or just wait for him to say it? And they said, like, encouraged him to go with that. And then, he went out and told to everybody. And like, the more he said that on TV, the happier they were. I mean, like, maybe they were putting him up to it. Like, I don't know if he had to say it, but like, I just don't, I don't trust him because he was like making a living off of like telling lies like afterwards. Like he can lie to the FBI if they wanted him to lie to them, but then he comes out and he's trying to make a lot of money off of, like, he told lots of lies in public on Hannity, did he not?
Well, it's not. I mean, I wouldn't really say they're lies. They're just,
like he really believes those things, you think?
I don't know. And we spent so much time about Papadopoulos. I mean, that's sort of the big frustration, broadly speaking, is that, we do spend so much time talking about Papadopoulos or, these different avenues, and some of them are false, some of them are just non-substantive. And, we spend so much time on that. And then some of the more recent stuff, especially stuff we've discovered in the last year, doesn't get nearly the same amount of attention. Even today, like I field a lot of questions, and today I still get a lot of the questions I receive are still about Papadopoulos. And it's like, over the last year, I've gotten so much information, and it's still, Papadopoulos is still like 30 or 40% of the questions I get. And there's been nothing new on that for like 6 years. And it's been pretty clear that like the missuit angle, there's really nothing there ever since we got the page or page and a half, 302 for missuit. And it was clear, like the FBI did not even see this guy as a player. Like based on the very, very limited questioning the FBI did the missuit, like they knew this guy was a nobody. So, I mean,
there's just so many names. Like now, I want to figure out which names that I was supposed to remember that I actually shouldn't remember. Like I have these names in my head. Like, is Deripaska important in anything?
Yeah,
no. Yeah,
there'll be something there. Yeah,
remember them all. They all come back up. This is the way this game works.
What about, is there someone named? I got this name in my head. I don't think I had it right. It's like Rene Akhmedchen. Who's that? Like something Akhmedchen.
He was an agent.
What the hell is
some
that?
of the very early allegations that really didn't amount to much. That was like, Trump was involved in various.
That was one of the remember the names.
Yeah, you can forget that.
I don't want to besmirch Dan Bongino. He's awesome. I love Dan Bongino, by the way.
Bongino's great.
Yeah. Hey, Willie's here.
Yeah.
What's up, Willie?
Akhmedit or whatever is Dutch Turkish guy involved in some deals, a bit like Milian, and had his name besmirched. Nothing came out of it, although he doesn't think he can get back into the US for some reason. So, but that sort of died a death.
And so, who's Azra Turk then?
Anyone? Yeah, I don't know. Probably a nobody. I mean, I wouldn't worry about it too much.
I thought she was everything before. Like I thought that everything was going to hinge on Azra Turk.
Well, and see, like by the same token, I wouldn't be hard on Bongino at all, because Bongino's doing the best he can to report the best information that he has at the time, and to that end, it's extremely important to keep this in the public conversation and keep people talking about this stuff. And if that wasn't the case, like if I didn't stumble across Fool Nelson and some of these guys talking about this stuff on Twitter, I would have never started looking at any of this stuff. So it's really important to encourage the public conversation. And I see a lot, and I'm not saying that you are, I see a lot of people out there that are bashing Bongino about,
no, I'm not
Durham hasn't delivered and all this stuff. And I'm sure he's sick of that, but it's so unfair to him because he's going off the best information he has. He's doing it's not just for a show. I mean, I think it's a public service what he's done. And keeping this out there and reporting on it. And, if you pick up his books are outstanding. His books are some of the best research that is out there because he cites everything. There's nothing in his books that he's just making up. There's no, speculation in there. He's citing story to story. I don't know. There's probably like 500 different citations in those books. And that's what I really like about Bongino. So,
no.
I'm not saying you're bashing him, but I'm just saying, if there's anybody in this chat that is, like,
No,
Like we have a problem.
I said right away. I said it was because of what Papadopoulos said that sent Bongino off in that, and it's not at all Bongino's fault. Everybody was running with what the stuff Papadopoulos was saying. And another thing, like, yeah. Anyways,
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that. It was just and like I say, I don't know. Maybe Papadopoulos is a great guy too, and I don't know what he was, how much he had the screws put, turned into him, like, too,
Yep.
So anyway.
Well, it's been a
Just
good
a lot of
chat,
names.
guys.
It's just the names is the thing, though. It's like you got to get the names straight that for the players, right? Like, and it's just some of them shouldn't be in there because they're not actually players anymore. Just false leads or whatever.
Yep.
That's all I was trying to say.
No, I gotcha. MB, do you have anything else? I might wrap up here. All right.
Hey,
Willie, go ahead.
Yeah, just one last thought before we go away. I know you wanted to wrap up about 2 hours in.
Yep.
The church committee-ish, the newish church committee, the whole point of Congress is to look at stuff that they can make legislature about or legislative things about. So, but thinking about maybe what's the outcome of this. So, yeah, I would love to see all the documents like unredacted and fill in the blanks from these last 4 years. But going forward, it's like, what is the one thing that they could legislate, that they could like
budget,
like the FBI, how the FBI getting involved with Twitter, or the FBI interfering in 2016. The outcome of this whole churchish committee thing surely has to be some legislation, and even if they have legislation already, but there's that second bit about what is stopping the FBI breaking the law, which they've done, probably. I probably, as my lawyer in the background saying that. We have the laws, but how are they getting round? Like, how are they escaping this to influence elections, or what division does stopping foreign election interference mean? Getting Twitter to violate First Amendment. I think that's the big thing, and it all goes back to Russiagate and this investigation, and it goes back a long way. It's like this counterintelligence thing. If you go back to the 50s and 60s, there was a serious worry about the next president in the Cold War being an actual Manchurian candidate, being somebody who was controlled by Russia. The sort of 1960s, this whole communist versus capitalist, who wins that, and that's not changed. It's just changed in a slightly more nuanced way. And so the FBI, they do have this counterintelligence function to stop interference, to stop Manchurian candidates, etc. But where are those limits like delineated? How can Congress oversee that, and what laws might or might not be needed to supervise that? It's so. But going back to the Pfizer warrant, Pfizer was, we saw them come up with like sketchy, searchy type warrants, and not really warrants, but the sketchy Pfizer in 2016. that was set up as a legitimate counterintelligence function and a need to know basis, which probably got abused. One of our sort of in our corner, but in Congress type people, Devon Nunes, when it got through to like renewing the FISC, the FISA court, allow that to happen because they understood that counterintelligence function of them. But it's obviously been abused, and the route round through the private sector's probably been abused. What is the end game for this select committee?
What it could be digital bill of rights.
No, I think that's a really good point, William. That's why I say I think we're finally at a point where we have to ask the question, have the discussion. Are we doing more harm than good with our counterintelligence work? And I know that that's a hard question. Nobody wants Al Qaeda running wild. Nobody wants the Russians, the Chinese, anyone like that. But we have to ask the question, is more damage being done by our intelligence community than protection they're providing our country? And I guess that's my last thing, Undead.
Yeah, MB, Willie, those are good points. I mean, one thing I've been thinking about legislatively, data privacy law, and MB, we've talked about that on previous spaces, where it's like, all this DNS activity out there is being data mined, and all the stuff, even related to Russiagate and the executive office, data, whatever they were doing with Trump's data and the Yodaphone allegations and the Alpha Bank allegations, all these data streams, all that should have been subject to a warrant. Like, you should have a very good trail about who accessed that data, and it should be kept under wraps. I mean, there's no reason that, given the advanced state of tools today, the protections are very limited. I mean, you can say, if you're a telecommunications company, you can say, well, yeah, we share some very limited anonymized, data for research purposes or whatever. But it's like, okay, well, if you give it to the government, they have the tools to take away our anonymity based on, various, algorithms and whatever else they're doing to associate that with an identity. I mean, that's what they're using the data for. They're not just playing around with it. And if they can do that, then, you can't just be releasing your customer data and you can't be selling it. We have a right to privacy. We have an expectation of privacy with our data and what we're doing online. And, that should be a big goal legislatively. I would agree wholeheartedly with, taking another look at the counterintelligence mission of the FBI, because, they're supposed to be the Bureau of Investigations, and those investigations were supposed to be like predicated. And once you enter into a counterintelligence mission, predication becomes very, very minimal. I mean, you just have to say, well, there's some intelligence value there, and you can open a case file, and then, yeah, you can violate the shit out of somebody, and then eventually come across something that's criminal, and then refer it over, and then you have a case file already ready to go, and that's not right. Like, that's not the system that we signed up for, and I certainly never thought it'd be like this. I mean, I was the first person, back September 11th and ensuing years, Ron Paul and Rand Paul, they were both talking about privacy rights, and they were both talking about the Patriot Act and all this stuff. And I don't know to what extent these programs exist under that authority or just, other authority or not at all. But yeah, we need to take a hard look at that. I mean, are we really, is it worth trading off, all these abuses against our own country domestically for whatever protection we gain from terrorists? And it's like, okay, we just gave Afghanistan back to the terrorists. So it's like, I don't get it. Like, are we, I don't know. I don't know.
So one of the things like people are saying, oh, just like ban the FBI or like just like do it as JFK and whatever into the wind. But I'm not sure that it doesn't need to be split into two things, the counterintelligence mission, and the criminal thing, and then split them. That might be a legislative end game, so that they have this protection, or they can act on intelligence, which is counterintelligence, but the sort of then weaponizing that through the lawfare. That sort of, but those two missions have sort of melded somehow. And I know they say, "Oh, we keep them separate," but they obviously don't, because you're asking questions when they say, "Oh, that's sources and methods," and that's sources and methods are definitely a counterintelligence like function rather than an investigative criminal function. And I think the Congress, they have a problem, because at the moment, the way that FBI is structured and the other 16 intelligence agencies is they can just go, "Oh, that's classified," but is it? And this overclassification thing's a problem. We're sort of, we're probably not going to see most of this new church inquiry. I think it was Thomas Massey was on Tucker yesterday or something saying, "Yeah, well, it's going to be in a skiff," and a lot of Congress think that that's a good idea. I think it's a good idea. We discussed this earlier, or it was discussed earlier, but it's probably not going to be grandstanding about, "Oh, I'm the representative from Iowa, to get more votes and to get more funding." It hopefully will be better, more focused than the original church committee. But it's what do you want out of it? Do you want what do you want out of it? What's the end goal? What's the legislative end goal? And once you've done the legislation, how does Congress then hold these agencies to account? Because they come up and they can just hide behind this anonymity, which the average American person doesn't have. I can't say because it's classified, and I think that needs to change.
Yeah, Willie, I mean, I was looking at the church committee a little bit, at least on Wikipedia and a couple of reports. And one of the things that they did was, when the president at the time said, "No, all this information, we want to remain classified," the committee decided they would just unilaterally declassify it. So that's pretty amazing. And it's hard to envision that happening today. But I think the committee should strongly consider, seizing that authority. I mean, however they did it, without anything bad happening back in 1975, they should do the same thing. They should have unilateral declassification authority, and they should just go ahead and do it over the objection of the president. And I mean, at the same time, I think reforms to the FOIA would be great. I think we need to consolidate the FOIA systems and do a major overhaul of that whole system to make that a whole lot easier too. So good chat. It's been a long day. Got a lot going on, but I appreciate everybody stopping in today. I think I'm going to end the chat here. Probably we'll do a couple more chats here in the future, but I thought that was a good exercise to kind of collect some ideas, especially, to any extent that members of Congress might follow us on Twitter or read what we write at all. I think it'd be good if we can try to push a few ideas and hopefully they know everything we know and they're on top of it. But, I can't, hold it against them. I mean, there's so much information here and it's hard to process it all. And it's hard to pick out the people that have, legitimate insight and a basis behind their ideas from, some people, quite frankly, that are a little bit more on the QAnon side and they're a little bit further out there. And sometimes, it's hard to differentiate them on the face of some of the stuff that's said. But, we have a really good core of researchers in this corner. And, I appreciate, Cash and Jan shouting us out. Obviously, some of those relationships are great, and we appreciate that. And, I'm